Good morning all, Sass members and others. Welcome to our meetup of the 30th of October 2022, where Anel Martin will talk to us about communicating with impact, particularly when you're a marriage officiant or an officiant in some other form. Anel is an international speaker and a results-based coach. She is also a prospective marriage officer, like many of you. So we're looking forward to hearing her point of view on how you can communicate with impact. And at this point, I will stop sharing my screen, I think, not that way, that way, and hand over to Anel.
Fantastic.
Anel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Firstly, everyone, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It really is a privilege to be able to chat to all of you. Like Rick mentioned, I draw from experience from about the last decade on, speaking internationally to people on stage in small groups as a facilitator. I just want to say up front, I have no experience as a marriage officiant, so I'm planning to use the skills that I've acquired to boost those ceremonies that we are presenting. So with that in mind, I want to go over onto my presentation. You must excuse me, when I do online training, I always use a presentation. I feel, communicating visually often gets the point across. Can everyone see my screen? Fantastic. So without further ado, communicate with impact. Here are some of the things that I've learned from some of the best speakers in the world. Just briefly, I'm not even going to go over the slide. Rick actually introduced me. I wasn't sure whether he was going to. I've got an online academy. I do training. I've got a podcast. I do coaching. I do social media for clients, and I'm a published author. So today, what we're going to discuss, I always like to create a little bit of certainty so that you know what we're going to dig into. I want to talk about some communication fundamentals. Now, the idea here is you may have heard about these principles, but I just want to make sure that we all start from the same foundation. It's often because we do communication in some form or another, we sometimes just need to bring the perspective back to the fundamentals. The next thing is body language. Body language has a massive impact on how you are perceived. And once we've gone through the fundamentals of that communication, you'll understand why. The next thing is voice, how we use our voice when we present. I think you'll all agree with me. You have to do a beautifully crafted script justice, and voice and body integration into the words that you use is so critical. The next thing is the impact of your script, your mindset, and how you physically go about preparing for your ceremonies. So the fundamentals, I think all of us should be familiar with this model. We've got our sender, our encoding, what we are thinking about, then we have how we get the message across. The important part I want to focus on is you've got to think about your receiver and how they decode the message, because sometimes things are lost in translation because we're not integrating all the communication tools. And then something that's often disregarded is noise, and there are various factors that can create noise when you are presenting. So now we'll go into it, but noise is not only physical noise. So noise can be physical. There may be a helicopter overhead, as I once had at an event. It may be somebody shuffling around in your audience that distracts you and your audience. It may be physiological. You may walk up and do your ceremony with a massive headache. You can't at that point say, I can't do it. Or somebody in your audience may be experiencing pain. So that noise can also be on a biological level. Then psychological or semantic, where we are using verbiage that doesn't translate to the audience. Now, this is a very, very important model. The research was conducted by Dr. Albert Mehrabian, And to me, this is the most profound thing we need to understand about our communication toolbox. The first thing is your script, your beautifully crafted script, will only make up 7% of what is retained by the audience. Okay, so that to me is quite scary when we think about how we prepare and the thought we put into what we're doing, is we tend to focus on that 7%. Your verbal skills, how you sound, how you project your voice, how the audience hears that voice, will be 38%. And then your body language alone adds another 55%. And that's how you get to the 100% package. So we really need to think about what we are doing with our bodies, what we're doing with our voice in conjunction with that script, not in isolation. So another very interesting and disproved statistic, this went viral a couple of years ago, is that the human attention span went from 12 seconds to currently at 9 seconds, which is shorter than the goldfish. Now, this has been it was quoted out of context, so this is not accurate, but I think we can all agree people's attention spans are getting smaller. You know, we are so used to being on our mobile phones, being distracted all the time, that it's very hard for people to be in the present. So I mention this to you so that you take this into account as you prepare for your ceremonies. So this is actually from one of the decks that I use for corporate clients when I do coaching with them or I do group sessions on presentation skills. And, you know, it's aptly titled How Not to Be Boring. So I think the most important thing is to land the plane. Let's not go in circles. Let's be quite direct in the communication. Avoid too much repetition. The next thing is keep it simple. It sounds counterintuitive, but there was a research study done at Harvard where they actually confirmed that people who use simple, direct language come across as more intelligent. Now, as a second language English user, this is very important to me because I think we feel we need to impress people and take out our best English, but that doesn't necessarily translate to your audience. So keep it simple, keep it direct. Variety in tone, speed, inflection, and pause. You know, the more variety you have in your voice, the more you use your vocal abilities, the easier it is to follow along. We've all been in those meetings at work where that one person who's got absolutely brilliant ideas drones on. After the third or fourth minute, nobody's in the room with that person anymore. And to me, that's quite sad. You might have the best idea in the world, the best message in the world, but by not harnessing that vocal ability, you lose the audience. Integration and engagement. Okay, so depending on how formal or informal a ceremony is, whether you engage the audience, and there are multiple ways to do that. Taking a different approach to others. Now, I have the privilege of working with 2 different celebrants in the UK for their social media accounts. And both of them are so very, very different. The one is absolutely this nature spirit, this very calm, peaceful human being. And the other one has bright pink hair and is so dynamic and, you know, does these almost Mad Hatter's picnic kind of weddings, you know, over the top. And what I love about these 2 individuals is they are not competing for each other's business. They collaborate very well together, but they've found their unique voice. They've differentiated themselves. Avoid cliches. Now, we all know why that puts the audience off, but it is worth mentioning. Apply your knowledge of the audience to full effect. So whenever I'm dealing with an audience, I'm trying to find out as much about them as possible. So I imagine myself, when I start work as a celebrant, having conversations with my couple about who will be in that audience, who are we physically talking to, and so that you can craft that message around not only your couple, but something that's going to be received well by everyone who's in attendance. And then I love this quote by Marilyn Monroe. It's better to be absolutely ridiculous than absolutely boring. You know, people, I always say to my 2 celebrant clients, you are privileged enough to be there for the most important moments in somebody's life. And I think that's a very serious responsibility. It shouldn't be a moment that they forget. It shouldn't be a moment that they look back on and think, oh, that was the boring bit. So we really have an obligation to give them the best that we can. So make it about them. Now, make it about them specifically is, who are we talking to? Who is the message crafted for? And as much as, yes, I agree, your couple is the most important audience here, you also want something that's memorable for family and friends. So focus on giving to your audience. This is a fantastic hack that you can use. When you start thinking about your audience when you deliver, you tend to be less nervous and less worried about, do I look stupid? Am I going to fumble? Because you're not thinking about you. So really make that the core focus. Create value for your audience. I tend to look at what I'm doing in terms of when I'm speaking to an audience on stage. If I look at the message, I always ask myself, so what? And when I ask myself, so what, I find the core of what I'm trying to get across. Connect with your audience. Now, there is a fantastic trick. If you feel intimidated by a large crowd, I always advise people, and I use this trick myself, to talk to specific individuals in the audience. Make direct eye contact. Do not look at the group in front of you. Make individual contact and you will find those nerves easing. Usually the first 2 or 3 minutes, which feels like an eternity, is the toughest. So just be aware that making that individual eye contact, moving around the room or around the venue that you're using, can really help you settle. What does the audience really need from us? And I think whether it's a memorial service, a life celebration, a wedding, a vow renewal, they need very different things. So we need to gear that communication towards that outcome. What do you want from them? What do you want them to take away from this experience? So for me, when I deal with audiences, I always think about, how do I want them to feel? And when I work in the training space, I want them to feel more confident. I want them to feel excited. I want them to feel empowered. So that is the baseline, the foundation where everything starts from. And that's what I try to convey. So why does working on your voice and body language matter? And I forgot to say up front, folks, we are a small group today. Jump in if you've got questions. Please, this is not a formal session. Jump in at any time if you want something clarified. Okay, so why does it matter? Let's face facts. People do judge a book by its cover. And I think it's even more important if we work in this space, that we present ourselves in a way that will be good for business. Because at the end of the day, you would like good word of mouth. You would like to do a lot of celebrations or a lot of different ceremonies. So you want somebody in the audience to say, wow, that was professional, that looked good, it sounded good, great message. You know, I'm going to take this person's name and contact them when I've got something going on. So it's important for that to present your image professionally. Poor body language and voice creates an incorrect picture. People make millisecond judgments, and that is not because they are unkind. It's because that's how the human brain works. So we really only have one chance to make a first impression. It can affect the opportunities that you are offered. So understanding your niche and what your niche needs is very, very important. And it affects your personal brand. And I think for any of us to be successful, we really need to have that good professional brand. And that has to be a well-polished brand, not only what I bring to the ceremony, but also the entire package, how we position ourselves online. If you have a website, those things matter. Which brings me to body language. So the non-verbal, we already said, is the 55%. Facial expressions are incredibly important. Now, not all of us, I'm very animated. I use my hands, I have terrible facial expressions. Whenever there are pictures of me presenting, I'm always pulling my face. You don't have to be that big in your delivery. Just find what is natural and comfortable for you. But do try to smile to your audience, to connect with that audience via your eye contact. It really does warm up the room, because it's very intimidating when you get behind that podium and you have to speak to a room full of strangers. So be aware that your facial expression can change the game. Something that I always say to people that I mentor on speaking is, when you smile at somebody, their natural reaction is to smile back. And both of you give off happy chemicals in your bloodstream and everyone feels more relaxed. So top tip. Micro expressions. Now, how I can best explain micro expressions is, when you see somebody smile, but you feel it's a fake smile, it's usually because they're missing the micro expressions. Now, the micro expressions can usually be little lines around the eyes, or that impression that you get that the person's eyes light up. And that's not something that can be faked. So it's very difficult to achieve that artificially. The next thing is eye contact, which we've touched on, your posture. Now, whether I work with men or women around the world, they always say to me, Anel, what role model, what body language can we look at and try to emulate? And my answer is always the same for men and for women. If you look at YouTube videos of somebody like Barack Obama, he has beautiful, square, very elegant body language, and it works for both men and women. So if you're looking for body language that you can go and work on and emulate, that would be a fantastic example. He's not overwhelmingly butch, but it's very straight, very open, and that creates a much better picture. So be aware of that. Hand gestures. Now, I normally, when I'm sitting at a laptop and presenting to people virtually, I tend to use my hands a lot, because you are losing a lot of your body, your natural body language. So be aware that I know one of the celebrants, forgive me, I can't remember who it was on the last call, mentioned that he had done a memorial service via a webinar. So be aware that sometimes you might be in that situation, and then your hand gestures become important. Your body, and then how you dress. Now, folks, I love my one celebrant client always says, I'm not there to be in the spotlight. I'm there to stand next to you while you're in the spotlight. So we can't, I mean, it's not like you are talking at an event and you are the headline speaker. That's not the idea. But I do recommend that you think about what you wear. For me, it's almost an added layer of confidence. I know if I'm going up in front of a very big crowd, I will make sure I've got red lipstick on and I'm wearing a red jacket, because it makes me feel powerful. So think about the picture that you are creating for that couple, and also what you are going to be comfortable in. You know, I think for ladies especially, you know, if you are not used to wearing those super high heels and you feel pressure to wear them, I want to say to you, it's going to affect your body language and your overall presentation. So rather pick something that you feel good in, that you look good in. Don't overcompensate there. Ladies, another very important thing, jingly jewelry. Anything that makes a noise, anything that jiggles too much tends to upstage you. So don't make wardrobe choices that distract from your presentation. And then very important here is that 40% of the human brain is used to tap into visual stimulus. So you can be, your script can be light, but if your body language and your engagement is excellent, people will rate it better than if you've got a fantastic script and you haven't done the work around body language and voice. So always think about it. The human being is a visual animal. Now, today I've got the luxury of slides, so I can distract you with some visuals and I can add impact with visuals. You will not necessarily have that when you are presenting at a ceremony, but I do think that we need to bear that in mind when we think about how we project our body language. So I love this quote. It says, body language is a very powerful tool. We had body language before we had speech, and apparently 80% of what you understand in a conversation is read through the body, not words. Okay, very, very critical. So body language tips. For those of you who feel, you know, and it's normal, I just want to say, every single speaker that I've ever worked with is nervous before they get on stage. I'm anticipating that I will be nervous the first time I have to do a ceremony. This is normal. I always say to people, when I stop feeling nervous, it's because I don't care. You only feel those jitters because you care. You care about the couple, you care about your audience. But you have to harness that and turn it into good stress, not negative stress. So here are some tips that can really help. The first thing is body awareness. If you tend to fidget with your hands or you tend to touch your neck, touching your neck is a very, very major clue that you are feeling uncomfortable. You know, it's one of the most primal, primitive things. So be aware of what you do with your body when you feel under pressure. Getting a monitor, a neutral observer. Speakers learn so much from other speakers. You know, you have somebody in that peer group who gives you honest feedback, constructive criticism, and you keep improving by watching others and getting good feedback. So I always say to people, I love feedback. Feedback is fuel. I never view it as criticism. I view it as, I'm only getting this piece of feedback once. I'm going to work on it. I'm not going to get this feedback again. So I want to challenge you to find somebody who can crit you to help build up that repertoire. Emulating good, powerful body language. You know, there is nothing more low power than hunching yourself over, making yourself small. So always think about, as long as you remember, you need to present an open square frame to your audience. That already reads 80% better than hunched over your notes. Practicing with a mirror or on camera. This can be very beneficial. It is very uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie to you. This is one of the things that I dislike the most. Now, during the COVID period, I went from traveling to 2 different countries a month, meeting people face to face, being in the room, feeling the energy, to having to do everything online. The advantage here is I've become a lot more comfortable when it comes to a digital format, but none of us like the way we sound or the way we look. What you're trying to do is monitor those micro expressions, make sure that it's reading correctly. Okay, so that's important. Which brings me to voice. Now, we mentioned 38% is what you hear. And now I'm not talking about words, I'm talking about the sound that you make. And I always say to people, unfortunately, you are born with a specific instrument, a specific way that you sound. You cannot radically change the voice, but you can always improve the voice if you put in the work. First thing is voice. When it comes to voice, is pitch. Anything that is too high pitched is very difficult for the audience. Okay, you can change pitch with practice, but it's something that's quite important. People experience others with deeper voices. I always talk about the caramel effect. Those smooth, deeper voices are always enjoyed more by an audience. Now, if you're not born with that, it's very difficult to acquire, but this is work that's worth doing. Your tone, so being appropriate, how it comes across. We all know that it's Often an argument is caused by your tone of voice, not the words that you used. So we've got to be aware that we are aiming things correctly. If you think about the tone of voice you would use in a memorial service versus what you would use in a wedding celebration, those are radically different. So just make sure that that's appropriate. Volume. I think this is probably the most important issue that most people have when presenting. You know, if you are at a ceremony, you were expecting equipment, you know, mics and that kind of thing, and suddenly the power goes down. The show must go on. You can't at that point, you know, call everything off. So we always have to think about volume, not necessarily as being loud, but projecting so that everyone in the room can hear you. People tend to speak too softly, and that also affects getting your message across. Emphasis. So emphasis can also change meaning. So we've got to be very aware of which words we emphasize, where do we put the stress in that sentence. And it's very important when you plan that script. What we normally do is you will take a pen and you will just underline the words that you want to emphasize so that when you are reading it, when you are rehearsing it, you're placing that emphasis exactly where you want it. We will get into rehearsal because this is a critical component, and I'll explain to you what happens in the brain when we do that. Energy level. And energy level, whether this is a memorial service or a wedding, we still need to turn up. We still need to be physically present. So it's not necessarily, you know, it will be the energy level that's appropriate for the scenario, but you still need to show up with a level where people feel you take this seriously, you're in the moment, you're engaged. Articulation, very important. And then speed, too slow or too fast will also influence how that message is received. Now, a lot of people tend to, when they start feeling nervous, start speaking very fast. I'd love to hear when we get to Q&A if anybody deals with that issue, because it is triggered by nerves, and that can be, it feels like a runaway train when you're standing in front of people. It feels like you're going faster and faster and faster. And there are tricks to get around that if you suffer from that. So common vocal issues, let's have a look. Your voice is heavily tied to emotion. So a lot of us, when we experience nerves, you'll have that shaky voice, okay? And that is also something we can work on. Your clenched jaw, if you feel that pressure in the body, you tend to clench the jaw, the sound, the space that the voice can come through gets smaller, and you don't project as well. Another very common one that I've just alluded to is that rushing, that speeding along, becoming like a runaway train. Too nasal or high-pitched, that's very often a complaint about that vocal delivery. Low resonance. So resonance is basically how full your voice sounds. If you don't have resonance, your voice sounds thin or it sounds tinny. Okay. Now that is also something, sorry, I've got somebody racing past my front door. That is also something that can be very easily acquired with work. Too little variation, intonation and volume. So that droning effect. You wouldn't enjoy it if I did the whole presentation to you like this today, because my energy is a bit low and I don't have a lot of variation. Nobody's going to listen to you if that's the approach. So we need to, if you don't naturally do that, if you're not naturally expressive, think about small variations you can use. Use the right speed when talking. Okay, not everything needs full speed. Your audience really sometimes needs a little bit of a gap to think about what you've just said. So it doesn't have to be all talk. You need to plan that when you are scripting. No pauses or pauses that are way too long. You need to feel that out. And I think the more you do ceremonies or presentations, the easier it becomes because you start to read the audience. Talking too much or too little. You know, there's a very fine line, and we have to, as I mentioned in the beginning, we've got to land the plane. So not getting too verbose, not going too far, but also not skimping and giving them too little. So improving voice, much like improving your body by going to the gym, improving your voice is not overnight. There are very simple things that you can do to enhance that instrument, but it requires regular practice. Now, this is not nearly as strenuous as going to the gym. So bear with me, I've got some top tips. The first thing, people take this for granted, is doing proper breathing. An instrument that doesn't have fuel cannot produce. Okay, so whether you play an oboe or a saxophone, it's all about breathing and how you use that air. So the same thing applies when it comes to your voice. Now, I want you to just put your hand on your tummy, the top part, you know, of your tummy, and the right place to breathe from. You should feel your hands move there. A lot of people tend to breathe, and they breathe very shallow. So you breathe here. Where you should feel breath is on your tummy. When you hold your tummy, you should feel your diaphragm. That is when you are breathing correctly and you are setting yourself up for success. Important thing is, when we are experiencing a lot of adrenaline, you tend to breathe shallow. Okay, so a couple of deep breaths before you do that ceremony is going to help your vocal delivery, and it's also going to calm your nerves. Very important. Warm up every day. Now, this can be very simple. This can literally be hum a tune in the shower, you know, sing along to your favorite song on the radio. To me, this is a very important part, especially if you've got an early morning ceremony, because a lot of us wake up and we've got croaky voices in the morning. Warming up that instrument, make sure that it is absolutely at its best when you need to use it. So very important tip. When you have nasal quality, there are vocal exercises that you'll find on YouTube. They often refer to it as the yawning exercise. So you'll go, oh, oh, but that forces the voice, not through the nose, but through the mouth. Very simple, but it needs to be repeated. The next one is low resonance. If you feel that your voice doesn't feel rich, that caramel effect I was talking about, simple humming is the best way to ground that voice. Humming is really something very simple, something that doesn't draw a lot of attention to yourself. You can do this quietly at your desk while you work, but that is a major builder for your voice. High pitch, again, breathing deeper, breathing into the abdomen, making sure that you fill the diaphragm, and you should feel an up and down movement when you are breathing correctly. That is foundational and will help if you feel that you are too high pitched. That shaky voice, that nervous shaky voice when you can literally hear your own voice shake, that is definitely tied to nerves. So a proper warm up and proper breathing before the time can really help. The other tip I want to give you is, if you tend to feel quite nervous, I always try to arrive early, meet a few people who will be at the ceremony itself so that you don't feel you're talking to a cold room. If that's at all possible, I want to encourage you to do that. Network a little bit, meet a few people who are going to be around so that you feel more anchored. Projecting. Now, projecting is not shouting. It's like the difference between being assertive and aggressive. Projecting is sending your voice to the person right at the back of the audience. And it's more about the intention. The voice travels without you becoming shouty or too loud. You literally just think about the person in the back row. Can they hear me? Okay, Very important. Now, I want to encourage you, if you've identified a specific issue that you need to work on, go and on YouTube, they have literally millions of videos on anything you can imagine. I've found some of the exercises very useful myself. I'm very happy that if you want to have a chat with me about what issue you have, to match you with a resource that could be helpful. So I make that offer available. Please get in touch if you need that. Find and use your natural voice. Now, I always, when people say to me, Anel, what is my natural voice? I say it's the voice you talk to your dog or your cat with, okay? The voice you talk to your child with, okay? Not when you're angry with your child, your normal voice that you talk to your child with. The people tend to change their vocal delivery for the environment that they're in, okay? So if you are in a very hierarchical company, you may adopt vocal qualities that are below your natural voice. If you are in a very toxic work environment, you may, again, your voice will become smaller. So you've got to just find that baseline. That baseline is so important because that is when you really hit the spot with your audience, when it comes from that real place. And then again, voice, this is not, you're not going to build a new voice in 2 weeks, okay? Anyone who promises you that is lying, but this work is worth doing because this influences the message, how much impact you have, how you engage with that audience, how you build rapport. So scripting, you guys are the experts on the scripting. So I'm not going to teach you anything about scripting today. I just want to give you some pointers that you can refer to as an expert compiling your ceremonies, what you should consider. So the verbal, that 7% is usually where we put 99.9% of the effort. Now, yes, this really needs to be crafted well and needs to be beautiful, but you also need the delivery to be spot on. So this is the vocabulary that we use, the amount of words that we use, the actual writing style that we use to compile a script, the language or languages that we use. Now, I always say to my international clients, you know, if you live in South Africa and you speak 2 languages, you are lazy. You know, most people in South Africa speak 3, 4, 5 languages. You know, I'm one of the lazy ones who's got 2 languages, but I will be my approach will be very different when crafting an Afrikaans ceremony to an English ceremony. And I will give language the respect that it needs when I compile that. It needs to be direct, okay? Direct, simple. Remember I said that creates a completely different picture. The more we go into complex, flowery language, the more the audience needs to consume and process that information, so the brain works harder. And sometimes it will be appropriate, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it will be in the right setting for the right person. But in general, your audience is bombarded with information. We talk about what they call infobesity, okay? Too many distractions, too much information. Sometimes that simple, direct approach can be beautiful in itself and really land well with your audience. Now, most important is the mindset, okay? Before we physically deliver this content, what we are processing in the background is very important on how the audience will receive you. Credibility. Now, you can't buy credibility. You have it and you work very hard to retain it and you build it up over time. So credibility, there is no quick fix. You have to do the work. You have to be in the trenches. And I think when you have credibility, you know, why should people listen to you? People feel that gravitas. They feel, you know what you're doing. And I think it's important when you think about it's a funeral service for a loved one. They want somebody they can trust, that they feel this person is going to come to the party. This person is going to be a good reflection on the day, make it memorable for those who are mourning. So I think the credibility portion is important. So I think first thing is, do I have the credibility to preside over the ceremony, whatever it might be? You know, I have hesitation and quite a lot of anxiety, even as somebody who speaks professionally, on whether I will be able to pull off a funeral or a memorial service. You know, so I think at this point in my career, I'm very excited about the weddings and the vow renewals, but I know it's going to take time for me to grow into the other aspects, because I personally don't feel I have the credibility there or the emotional composure yet. Okay, so be realistic about what you take on. Have I got the skill and background to do this properly? You know, and this is why it's so important that we're all going through the process with Sass. We really are creating some foundational learning, some structure that we can base our credibility on. You know, you didn't just walk off the street and now you're doing a vow renewal for people. You've gone through some kind of training process. How do I position myself as an expert? How do I get the message out that this is what I do? You know, you can be the world's best celebrant or officiant, and if nobody knows about you, you will not be able to share that gift with others. So we also need to think about, how visible are we? How do people learn about what we do? Okay, that's an important part. Do I know my own skills and the value that I add? Sometimes we have the most amazing toolbox. We do beautiful things in people's lives, but we don't value that gift. We don't, you know, and in the South African culture and often in the UK culture, where a lot of my clients come from, we're taught from a very small age, you mustn't brag. Now, folks, it's not bragging if it's true. We need to step confidently into what we are good at. Something that I find quite sad when I sit down with delegates in the classroom setup, if I ask them, list 5 things that you are really good at, and I give them a half an hour, they might list 1 or 2, okay? And that's with real teeth pulling. If, however, same exercise, I say to them, list 5 things you're not good at, most people can give me a list of 25 in 15 minutes, okay? So I think also part of this building credibility is you need to develop a level of self-confidence. You need to know what you are good at and be able to verbalize that. Confidence. Now, folks, confidence, people always think you are born with it and you have to be an extrovert. That is not true. Some of the most confident people with the best body language I've ever met have been introverts. So it doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be over the top. And confidence can be acquired. And it's, again, the mental self-talk. What I tell myself, what is ingrained, becomes that reality. So we need to really monitor that internal dialogue. Speaking of which, your internal dialogue, your mindset, is negative by design. It is hardwired into your biology. This is not just something happening with you. The human brain is designed to keep us alive. Having a negative design keeps us safe, keeps us away from anything that feels like risk. Okay. Now, I think for our ancient ancestors, this was an advantage. But for us as modern people, it is a disadvantage. It makes you not want to leave your comfort zone. It makes you not want to try anything new. It makes you not want to learn because you are then a beginner. Okay, so that is important to understand, that we need to push against that negativity. Repeated negative thoughts tend to wire more deeply than positive ones. Now, I know all of you are thinking, Anel, that is not true. Think about your last performance assessment at work, or the last time somebody gave you feedback on something. They may have told you 6 or 7 things you excelled at, but they mentioned one weakness. When you walk out of that meeting, what do you remember? Most of us remember that one piece of negative criticism, okay? Because it wires deeply and it resonates with that part of the brain. Self-talk needs to be regulated and corrected. So if you are saying to yourself over and over and over, you know, I'm not a good speaker. I'm always nervous. That is what's going to come to pass because you're setting your brain up to fail. We need to take a step back. And when you are saying those negative things to yourself, replace it with at least 2 or 3 things that are positive. And that just balances it out. It doesn't make it go away. But you will find the more you correct that self-talk, the less frequent it will become. We need to let go of perfectionism and strive for excellence. Nothing will ever be perfect, but you can aspire to be excellent, okay? And this is something that I learned throughout my working career is, I was quite type A, quite perfectionistic, and it really did slow me down. I turned down opportunities or sat on something valuable because I thought it wasn't perfect. So sometimes getting it out the door and making sure that it's excellent is much more important and a healthier mindset. And then whatever we tell ourselves, I am not old enough, young enough, pretty enough. I think we all have that I am not enough in our own lives. And that also holds us back. And if it's holding you back emotionally where you are today as a human being, it will also impact how confident you come across, how the audience reads you. So work on that. And I want to tell you, having worked with some incredible speakers, having genuinely had amazing people come into my life, every single person feels I am not the right person to be here. If that minute before you have to start that ceremony or get out on stage, you think, why am I here? Why did they not get somebody better? It is normal, okay? And if you don't experience that, then I start questioning. So not one person escapes those nerves before a high stakes moment like that. Which brings me to this wonderful tidbit I found online. Oprah, out of the 37,000 guests she's interviewed, there's a whole video on YouTube and it's actually fantastic to watch. She says, whether it's a celebrity, a rock star, a president, as soon as the camera is shut down after the interview, the first thing they ask her is, was that okay? Now, that again just reinforces the point that we all want that reassurance that what we've delivered was on the right standard. So just be aware that's a normal feeling after you've done the ceremony and you have that tense moment where you're waiting for that feedback. It is normal to feel that way. So building confidence, this is my own model. And, I always share this with clients, whether it's building confidence to take on a big project or building the confidence to speak. It works like this. Somebody says to you, I want you to do this ceremony for me. And you think, oh my goodness, am I ready? So there's this level of resistance that you need to get across to take on the challenge. If you are somebody who can't push the boundary of that comfort zone, you will never have anything that exists beyond that comfort zone. So understand there will be resistance, there will be hesitation. We need to push through. We need to accept the challenge. The next thing is learning. So, I've now taken on the challenge. I now need to knuckle down and figure out how to do this and explore things I haven't done before. Then sometimes you will fail. And failure is an important part of the process, okay? It's not something you can escape in the process. You will always, it doesn't matter how prepared you are, you will think, oh, I should have said that. I forgot to say this. I missed this line. That is part of the process. We learn through that, we refine through that. So always take the lesson. Then we think afterwards, a very important part of any presentation that I do is I post-mortem, I review, I look at what worked, what didn't work, and I try to troubleshoot those things and refine them for the next time around. And that's what I mean by taking the lesson. And then if you keep repeating the cycle, you eventually get to very successful results, okay? But this is the recipe. So there's a fantastic video I want to recommend to you by a lady called Amy Cuddy. And it's a TED talk about body language. I'm very happy to share the link. I'll pop it on the Sass group this afternoon. She says, our bodies change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes. So if the goal is confidence, don't fake it till you make it, fake it till you become it. Okay. And that is an important part of coming across confidently, having that credibility in the moment, is that we really have to integrate everything at our disposal. Now, in this video, she actually talks about more what your body language does to your biology, the fact that it changes your hormone balances. So priming your own body, it's not even about your audience. You are the audience in this situation. So please, I want to recommend that video to you. I will reshare the link. So making mistakes. Mistakes are never nice. I think when it's a mistake in one of these important moments in somebody's life, there isn't a redo. Okay, so as much as we don't want to make mistakes, things will come up. Okay, I always say to people when I train them on presentation skills, make mistakes early, figure it out as quickly as possible, fail forward. When you are an inexperienced speaker, there will be little fumbles, but if we can just make sure that we leverage those fumbles, we learn from those fumbles, we're going to get to a better end product much sooner. Regroup and move on. Okay, don't keep kicking yourself. Try to find the lesson and then carry on with the work. It's like when you fall off a horse. If you don't get on immediately after you've fallen off or shortly after, you'll never do horse riding again. Insert bicycle, insert whatever is relevant to you. But we need to, not fixate on what has happened. You win or you learn. Okay, this is what I always say to people. I don't fail, I take the lesson. And I think that has helped me refine my craft over a period of time. So taking the lesson we've talked about, okay, refining your skills. When we are scripting, I think the research portion, how we compile material, is so important. Now, this research can be finding out about your couple, finding out about the person who's passed on, but really digging deeper than the obvious. Benchmark with others. I think Sass gives you the opportunity to talk to people who are working as celebrants. And I think this was an important reason why I felt I wanted to join Sass, is not only, leveraging and learning, but also being able to talk to other celebrants and form a community and, get information, best practice, that kind of thing. Experiment with new approaches. Don't say, this is what I've always done, so it's good enough. Try different approaches. I think every couple is unique. Don't use a cookie cutter for every ceremony that you perform. This communication process is lifelong. I cannot sit here and tell you I'm an expert. I'm also still learning, and I still, take lessons from whoever I can get it from. So when you have that mindset, you're always acquiring new skills. That growth mindset, commit to the craft, commit and really feel passionate about what you do. Otherwise, you're not producing the best possible product. So now learn from others, really spend some time with celebrants who you feel you really respect. Find out what you can learn from them. Look at television interviews of people where you think, oh, that person has got great vocal delivery. Try and pick up tidbits, because that will also influence your own style. Now, preparation. Repetition and rehearsal are incredibly important, and not just your script, not just the words. Okay. They actually did research with astronauts and Olympians, and they hooked them up to a brain scan, and they got them to do the physical activity while monitoring the brain. Then they asked them to sit down and imagine the activity. Okay, close your eyes, imagine you are running the race. The brain fires identically in both scenarios. So the brain cannot tell the difference between you presenting your ceremony in person or you rehearsing your ceremony. If you're doing it with intention, your brain cannot differentiate. So if you've rehearsed in this way, your brain is not encountering this for the first time. Your brain is more relaxed, you have less stress chemicals. So you're basically giving yourself an advantage. Know your content. And I tend not to work very scripted. You know, you can see today I've got a couple of bullet points and then I speak to the bullet points. You know, this is not always practical. I assume in a ceremony, you want it worded and scripted in the right way, but really know what the content is. Own the content. Okay. I'm going to use an example from my own profession. If somebody phones me up and says, Anel, please can you present on finances for assistance? I'm going to say, no, thank you. I don't enjoy financial things. I have very bad figure retention. I can go and find material and present it, but I'll never feel good presenting it. So be very comfortable about what you put out and how you position. Rehearse. Do a dry run if possible, especially if it's something you're doing for the first time or you're feeling nervous. You know, do the ceremony for your dog. Okay, get your kid to sit down and do the ceremony for your kid or your husband or whoever you can rope in. Okay, it's going to feel strange. It's never going to feel exactly like it would be in front of people. But in that dry run, you may pick up something that didn't work. You could maybe get some feedback that can make this better. Okay, so don't rehearse in isolation. If at all possible, pull somebody in. Be ready for curveballs. Okay, even if you ask them, please, ladies and gentlemen, switch off your cell phones. Somebody's cell phone's going to ring, somebody's child's going to cry. You know, just understand that it's not the thing that happens, it's how we deal with that in the moment and how we can smooth that out. So presenting with impact. I just want to see how I'm doing on time. Perfect. Okay. Presenting with impact. This is when we bring these elements. We've now created the foundation of things we should think about. These are basically my tips on when we get to the physical day. How do we prep? I think the most important thing is confirming expectations. Do not assume, okay? Get very clear briefs on what need to happen. Check how much time's been allocated to you. I think the timing, if you don't keep to that timing, I know, you know, in the UK, they've got specific time limits for a cremation service. So they need to hit it in 45 minutes, okay? And that's very difficult with people who are grieving, okay? You have to know exactly how much time this person has allotted. And you've got to understand and be respectful that it can influence the rest of their day, the timing of their photographers, what time meals are going out. So be respectful of that. Who's the audience? We mentioned that. Now, you'll see certain strategic repetitions in my presentation. Because people's retention of material is so low, build in certain repetitions around the core message you really want them to take home. Okay, so use your repetitions strategically. How large is the audience? You know, a small, intimate gathering, your approach might be slightly different to a larger congregation or a larger group of people. What equipment will you have available on the day? Do not leave that to chance. Find out what will be there. Especially, you know, I once turned up at an event. There were 2,000 people in the room. And as I got on stage, they said, whoops, our microphone doesn't work. Okay, these things happen in the real world. So we need to prepare and know, not assume there will be a mic. Find out from the bride, find out from the groom, will this equipment be available? What is plan B when the power is out or a technical element fails? I think it was Vanessa who mentioned having that hard copy script. I always do that. Even as a speaker, I have a deck that I have a hard copy of in case of emergency. And, you know, we live in South Africa, so let's be realistic about that and let's be prepared for that. Arrive early at the venue. Now, this sounds so stupid, but we also know about load shedding and potholes and traffic. You know, don't put yourself under unnecessary pressure. Rather get there an hour or 2 hours earlier, have a cup of coffee, review your script, get comfortable with the venue, get comfortable with the tech. Don't create pressure for yourself. Test your mics and equipment and flip through your script if required. Okay, this is one of the advantages if you get there early. You've got a little bit of time to recenter. Okay, so now the actual presentation. Make sure that before you are doing that ceremony, that you have 2 or 3 minutes to yourself, just to center, not to talk to anybody else, to just get in the zone. This is really, really helpful. Okay. Chit chats before the time you might need to have, but even if it's just escaping to the ladies' room or to the gents, just for a couple of minutes of peace and quiet. Again, it just sets you up for success, gives you a foundation before you start. If you tend to talk very fast, and a lot of us do that, having a bottle of water, taking or a glass of water and just taking a small sip, that just gives you a natural break where you can hold the train and say, Anel, you need to slow it down. Then you can start at a slower rate without the audience realizing what's just happened. Apply that body language and voice toolbox to maximum effect. When you are doing that ceremony, I think, you know, when you even see a presentation, when it feels too scripted, it feels artificial. So make sure that it's conversational, that it doesn't feel like it's been repeated like a parrot over and over and over. Please never tell your audience, and that audience on the day could be your bride and your groom as well, or your bride and your bride. Never tell them how nervous you are. You can feel it, but you don't tell other people, because that also then changes the perception. You know, and never apologize when you are presenting material. All you do is you regroup, you repeat what you wanted to say, and you carry on as if nothing happened. And that's not to ignore the mistake. That's because if you then say, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, you actually make the audience feel uncomfortable. So best practice is regroup, move on. Never tell people how nervous you are, because you are then creating a disconnect with the audience. All audiences, I don't care what you present, I don't care who you're talking to, whether this is a one-on-one with your manager at work, or when you are talking to an employee at work, talking to a child, talking to a group of people, any communication which has passion, energy, authenticity, and generosity comes across beautifully. You don't have to be the best speaker in the world. If you've got those elements in the background, you will be successful. And you don't need to fill up every single second. I remember we talked about those pauses for effect to create mood. Those are really important. Give them a little bit of time to think about what you've just said. We've got to think about, again, I am the sender. I have coded, I've sent. Give them a chance to decode. And then final tips. Just be you. That's the advantage. Don't copy anyone else. Don't look at, I mean, you'll actually see the lady in this picture, a lady called Laura Schwartz. She worked for Bill Clinton. She's got an incredible TED talk on YouTube. Really somebody I admire for the way she presents. And she's always so glamorous and so perfect and so refined. And I always say, when I grow up, I want to be like Laura Schwartz. It's become this long-running joke. And actually, I don't have the Laura Schwartz factor. I've got my own thing. And when you really lean into your own advantage, that's when you become successful. We can all have role models and people we want to be like, but really stick to your own tune. Make sure it's about the couple and their loved ones. You are not there to be in the spotlight. You are there to shine the spotlight on them, okay? And I think we need to craft everything around them being the center of attention. The time and attention the audience gives you is a gift. It should not be taken for granted. And again, I want to say thank you very much for everyone's time today. You are giving me a part of your life, so I have to give you something of value. And that's the way we should look at this. Manage your brand online and offline. Manage it for the people that you want to attract to use you as a celebrant or as an officiant. People do go and look at what they can find. When they Google you, they will go and see, this is what I can find on you. So be aware of that. Everyone gets nervous, and it's only because you care. So your audience doesn't want you to be perfect. They want you to be present. And if you only take one thing away from today, it is the fact that we need to be fully present. Body, voice, and intention. Okay. So that happily brings me to the end of my presentation. Are there any questions, comments, things that resonated, anything you want to share? Such a quiet audience today. Is it because it's Sunday?
I'd like to share something if I can.
Yes, Des.
Yeah, just in terms of the anxiety, is the use of beta blockers. So you get tranquilizers which work on your central nervous system, which calm you. But where beta blockers work, actually antihypertensive medication, and the peripheral effects of adrenaline. So when you get an increased adrenaline, you get increased heart rate, increased breathing. So beta blocker suppresses all those peripheral symptoms without affecting your central nervous system. So they're actually fantastic things to take for giving a speech, or if you're doing a practical exam or something. So I've used them my whole life, and it's Inderal 10 milligrams. You can buy it at the chemist, so they're actually wonderful drugs to use.
Now, Des, you know, this is, I think, when you find a tool that's really useful, that you think, okay, that works for me, that is fantastic. You know, we all have our own way of dealing with those pressures. What I also want to encourage you in conjunction with that, the breathing techniques, because it slows everything down. What actually happens in your brain is your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all that executive functioning, literally shuts down because of adrenaline. Okay. So if we can just reduce the adrenaline, top up drop down the cortisol levels as well, you can actually achieve a lot better, that centeredness. The combination for you, maybe, not everyone wants to necessarily take something before the time, but try out that breathing technique. Just really focus on breathing, even if it's just for a minute, and see how it works in conjunction with that medication, because I think it could help quite a lot. I can absolutely fool my body into thinking I'm relaxed, but it's through practicing of certain techniques. Something that's really interesting that I didn't know, the same stress that a person goes through when they're in a serious car accident, that's what it's like walking out on stage in front of an audience. Your body goes through that level of stress. So don't ever take it for granted. This is an evaluative situation. The stakes are high. You care about what's happening. So that stress is normal. We also just need to find those techniques and those tweaks. So thanks for sharing that, Des. I hadn't actually heard of that. So that is something really interesting to look into.
Yeah, it's a banned substance, in like the Olympic Games for snooker players, it's a banned substance because it only blocks the adrenaline, it blocks the receptors to adrenaline. So it's purely an adrenaline blocker. There's no effect on your central nervous system.
Yeah, because, you wouldn't want to take something that makes you feel not focused, not in the moment. But that's really, really interesting. Des, I would love it if you could put the name of that into the chat. It sounds like something I need to look into for research purposes, definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Des. Sorry, is it Rhiannon?
It's Rhiannon. Hi,
Rhiannon.
Anel.
Rhiannon, if you
Yes.
don't correct me now, I'm going to rename you, and that's going to be your name forever. So thank you for correcting me. How can I help you?
It's okay. Thank you for a great presentation. I thought it was really, really good and interesting. And I like that you brought in sort of physical kind of things one can do, and then also the mental things and emotional and stuff. Just in a response to Des, I passed my driver's license on Enderal the first time because I was so nervous about doing my driver's. I was 18. My mum gave me one and said, take this, and I passed first time. So that they do work. I mean, I haven't taken them for many years, but I also just wanted to share two things. Another thing that also helps, that the brain doesn't realize, is when we smile, even if we grimace, if you're lifting your, doing that smile thing, it also helps you to relax and to feel better thoughts. So I'm not a very smiley person. So when I present and talk, I try to smile as much as I can. And obviously people react positively to a smiling person. And then the other thing that I found really helpful, I mean, I haven't done a lot of ceremonies, or two things. One was when there was an opportunity to do a memorial, and we were on the Sass group, and I said, oh, I'd love to do a memorial. It's something that I would like to learn more about doing, but I've never done one, so I don't think I should do it. And then can't remember who it was, maybe Calvin or somebody like that, wrote back, or Owen Swart, I think, wrote back and said, well, if you say that, you'll never do one because you have to, And so I decided, okay, the next time one comes along, I'm going to say yes. And it was a baptism by fire, so to speak, because it was a suicide. But it was the most amazing experience, and for the most beautiful young woman. And actually, so I really encourage people, just take just do it.
Yeah.
Is the
And
one thing.
you made a wonderful point there, that you were in that cycle of building confidence. You pushed through that first challenge. You said,
yes,
I am not comfortable, but I'm going to push through that first barrier. So that is really, I think, a brilliant lesson. And especially somebody like myself who still feels quite hesitant about taking on that kind of ceremony, you make a very valid point that you will never feel ready. You'll need to get yourself ready.
You won't. You're right. And so, and I almost feel that one was a real gift, like the first one, because it was so intense that I did one afterwards for an elderly man who had died. And although it was also, a lot, it was so much easier to do that and to be present for that. And then the other thing that I've started doing in all my ceremonies is I take a moment of silence at some point near the beginning for at least up to 3 minutes sometimes, which is very short actually, for myself, which allows me then to breathe, and also just for everyone who's there to kind of hold the couple in their thoughts, and send them love or good wishes, whatever they want to, or to connect with the surroundings, because normally one's in a really beautiful space. And that then also, I find, like you said, just slowing down and breathing and helps me and it also brings a sense of kind of gravitas to the ceremony.
But
So I just wanted to share that.
you're also helping your audience to be present. You're
Mm.
physically using a tool to say, do not be distracted. You are
Mm.
here for this reason. Let us all get together and be intentional about why we are here. So you're forcing them to slow down. You're forcing them to think about, you know, not what happened at work just before they got there, not about traffic, not about picking up their kids, you know. So that is a very, very good tool that you've just shared. Thanks so much for that.
And that's a lovely way to put it. So thank you, you know, because I say, and I just to say, you know, let's be intentional about why we're here. I'm going to use that. Thank you. So
you are so welcome.
Okay, thanks so much, Anel.
Anyone else? Anything else? Everyone happy? Rick, I hand back to you. Oh, Vanessa. Yes, Vanessa.
Sorry,
here we
just
go.
there. Yeah. Thank you very much, Anel. I really, really enjoyed. I think you've brought a lot of value to what we are here for. Thank you.
Thank you very
there are
much.
A couple of things that I wanted to ask you. One of them was taking a sip of water.
Yeah.
Do you think people? I've been conflicted about that because to stop and take a sip out of a plastic bottle, to me, I just feel a bit uncomfortable. But it is so important to keep our voices lubricated.
Vanessa, can I honestly tell you, you know, you might not be comfortable with a bottle of water. Having a glass, even taking a glass from home that you feel very comfortable with, something that's a little bit more elegant and not quite, you know, a plastic blue water bottle, you know. But for me, it's an incredibly useful thing, not only to keep the voice lubricated, but remember, as soon as we are under pressure, I can only imagine, you know, when you are in a situation and it's a memorial and everyone's crying, you also have a buildup of emotion. So it's also sometimes just for you to recenter without, you know, I mean, you can't go and break down in the middle of this. Sometimes you just need a strategic pause. So for me, it's absolutely a prop. I'm not even going to tell a lie. It is a prop for when I need to, when you have that moment where you think, where was I going next? It is something that's a natural part of, you know, people expect you, even on stage. I mean, speaking in front of a huge crowd of people, I have no hesitation to do that. So I think if you are worried about what it looks like, maybe find a glass that you think, you know, is girly and pretty and feels ceremonial in a way, because I think, you know, you don't want to kind of make it look cheap, you know, your presentation. But I wouldn't, as an audience member, I wouldn't take it as it looks strange. I mean, it's a normal thing that people do. So I wouldn't have any hesitation. Personally, I'd love to hear what Rick has to say.
Before we go to Rick, I just make another comment, please.
You're so welcome.
I worry about glasses. I mentioned it when I was talking about funerals, because I think particularly if we're doing anything online, it can be, I mean, these sort of glasses, not water, a glass of water, because I feel there is a glare, there's a reflection, particularly if someone is using a laptop. I don't, so my screen is upright. And would you, I suppose it depends on whether you can get by without your glasses or...
So very interesting point you make. I think, you know, when I do online training, I always wear my glasses because it's high strain. And, you know, some of my classes go on for a full day. When I'm in front of an audience, I don't need glasses for that. So then I speak without glasses.
Okay.
So I think it's more personal preference. Like I mentioned, ladies, you know, if it's big jingly earrings, that's almost more distracting than a little bit. I mean, let's use today for an example. I was wearing my glasses. How much did it distract you?
I'm afraid it did, because you tend to, when you're talking, you're lifting your voice because you're thinking about what you're going to say. And there's a certain angle where I couldn't see your eyes quite frequently. And I did find that, you know, that distracting, because we're all here to learn, and because I wear glasses as well, so I want to know, you know.
Yeah, so you were focused on that portion of it.
Not
Look, I
focused,
think,
but
you know,
I did notice it.
but I think you make a very excellent point. I think you have to be aware of, you know, in person, I would not normally wear glasses.
Okay.
So this is purely so that I can see what I'm doing. And it doesn't really worry me a lot when I watch somebody wearing glasses online. When you are dealing with face to face, you are sort of creating a barrier.
Yeah.
You know, so people do kind of feel it's a barrier. So if you can get away without, perfect. If you can't, I don't think it's a huge issue. So I think we tend to fixate on things that we have our own little things that we worry about. If you are there and you're in the moment with the right energy level, I can assure you they will not notice that you are wearing glasses. I once broke a heel literally 2 minutes before I had to get on stage. The heel was literally hanging by a thread and I was balancing awkwardly. And afterwards took them off and showed the event organizer that they were in 2 pieces. And she said, Anel, I never noticed.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes I think we fixate on things because there's a level where we feel, you know, I'm uncomfortable about something. That's why I said to you, wardrobe is so important for me, because it's almost like a shield of armor. I put it on and I boost my confidence up. And before I even worry about the content, I worry about what am I going to wear, because I know I'm not a fashionable girl. I don't have, you know, for me, it's very important to have that figured out, then I can figure out everything else, but to feel comfortable. Okay. So whatever's comfortable for you, if you've got a concern around it, you're always going to worry about it. So I would advise, where possible, avoid your glasses, because it's obviously something that's on your mind.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
And may I just finish off with one thing?
Yeah.
I read quite a long time ago, when people are talking about speaking in public, that in fact the audience wants you to succeed. Nobody wants to be in front of someone who's not doing well and isn't coping. And I think that I always find that people it helps to relax people if they think, you know what, we're all in this together. We all want it to go well.
Yeah.
So thanks very much again.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thanks, Vanessa. I really appreciate you being on the call with us today.
Thank you.
I see a hand.
Yes, it's Rhiannon again.
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
wanted to add something about the glasses thing. So I do wear glasses and I can't see far, but generally when I do a ceremony, I don't wear glasses because I can see my notes. But certainly if I couldn't see my notes, I wouldn't wear glasses. And I do use notes, and nobody seems to have a problem with that. But I have been to one ceremony where the celebrant wore sunglasses because it was outside. It was a very hot, sunny day.
Oh, I don't
And
know.
it wasn't great because they were dark and we couldn't see her eyes. And so, and I've also in my ceremonies where we've been outside on a hot sunny day and even the best man is wearing sunglasses, I say to everyone, please, no sunglasses, just for the ceremony, because I had that one experience and it was like a barrier. So for sunglasses, I think a definite no.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. You know, for me personally, you know, if I was in a situation and I knew it was going to be very bright outside, I may look for a lightly colored lens that's got a little bit of a UV block if I know it's outdoors. Yeah, but you make an excellent point, and it's something I hadn't thought of because, you know, I'm planning to do beach ceremonies. I'm going to have those days. So thanks for bringing that up, and I totally agree. Dark sunglasses also, from my side, it's a definite no.
Yeah.
Everyone else happy? Fantastic. Thanks very much, everyone. I really, really appreciate your time today and the opportunity, Rick. I really hope that everyone found something that they can use and something they can work on.
Thank you, Anel. for our guests, I'm just going to share contact details for Sass. Your central contact is secularsociety.co.za, from which you can find all the other resources. And you're welcome to have a look there and to contact us if you want to, or to join the mailing list, or to join as a paying member even. It's only with your support that Sass can grow and become a force for the secular movement in South Africa. Then I'd like to thank Anel very much for giving up of her time and her expertise for today. Much appreciated. I'm sure we've all learned something. If Anel, I could ask you to stay on a little bit after the others leave us. But thank you everyone for being here. And that concludes today's meetup.
Thanks everyone. Have a happy Sunday.
Thank you. Yes, thanks so much. Bye. Bye.
All right, thank you all.